We'll be happy to take a few questions. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask two things. What have your discussions been with Senator Booker and Senator Harris? And if you don't get this through the Senate by July 4th, do you lose this momentum?
I don't think the nation is going to allow us to lose the momentum. That's good news. I've had multiple conversations with Senator Booker, no conversations with Senator Harris, and I look forward to finding a middle ground where the motion to proceed will have, as been articulated here already, 100 votes to move forward so that we can actually have a robust debate about how to make the legislation better and serve the American people. And so I hope that he is willing to cooperate on getting us there, but certainly without any Democrat support, that means that this is only a symbolic moment and not a moment for us to make a law.
Are you open to any national mandates at all, whether it's mandating the use of body cameras, requiring, banning no-knock warrants in drug cases, or banning chokeholds? Are you open to any of those national mandates that the Democrats are proposing?
Well, certainly I think we achieve some of the same ends by our approach. Frankly, if you think about the inability to have any grants if your department has chokeholds, that frankly is by default a ban on chokeholds. The conversation will move forward, and only way we get to a place where we have a law is to work with our friends on the other side. We're willing to have that conversation. I think that there are things that I believe the conference will not support, but they will all support a conversation. I think we'll all support having meaningful dialogue, but whatever comes out of that dialogue will have to be in the best interest of the nation.
You're not ruling it out.
Yes.
One of the things that Democrats are talking about is qualified immunity, and they say that that's a sticking point. But yet we talk to a number of police officers who say, hey, you're not going to get qualified people. Why should I put myself on the line if I'm going to be able to have something taken away from me in a civil suit? Your reaction, is this off the table, qualified immunity?
Well, I think different members of the conference have different opinions on qualified immunity. My position has been that when the Democrats start talking about qualified immunity and the ability to aggressively pursue the officers at a higher threshold, that is hard. That's a poison pill from my perspective. Is there a conversation that could be had around something different? Perhaps. I haven't heard it yet, but we're open to hearing it. I think Lindsay alluded to the fact that there has been a conversation happening on the Judiciary Committee that may bring more light to this issue, but I have not had that conversation so far.
A couple questions. First, do you expect to have the endorsement of President Trump for this legislation? And also, when you met with the victims' families yesterday at the White House, did you talk to them about this bill? And if you did, what was their reaction to your approach?
Well, I hope the president will join forces and jump on board. I have had several conversations over several days with the president and his team who crafted the executive order. We were at least a part of the process of understanding and appreciating the direction of the executive order. I tried to take the information that I had about the executive order, hardwire the bill from mental health aspects of it, as you see the co-responders in the president's executive order, and then sitting down with the family members yesterday twice, once at the White House and the second time in my office. We went through the bill and what it does and what it doesn't do. They were, frankly, I think you heard in some of the media reports, they believe the bill is helpful. Does it take it to the level that every family member wants it to? I think the answer is probably not. Does it get us much closer? According to the words that I heard from the family members in both meetings, the answer is yes.
You said at the top that this is not a binary issue between supporting the police and pushing for those
Sure.
Black Lives Matter. But that said, a lot of the rhetoric we hear from the president, he'll tweak law and order, those types of things. Do you think that he can give a little bit? Because obviously he's going to have to give. If Democrat, you say, Senator Graham said you had good conversation with Democrats after the hearing yesterday. He's going to have to give a little bit. Do you think that he is willing to bend?
I'll say this. The president was the most presidential I've seen him talking to the families yesterday. It was not about anything other than finding justice for the victims and their families. If you want to see the president's willingness to bend, so to speak, it's not so much about bending and all about finding justice and the path forward. His instructions to the AG yesterday during that meeting with the families was get it done. Don't tell me you're going to do it. Go do it. Start getting closer involved in the cases that are yet the outcome is still undetermined. The president's willingness to meet us on this issue, it's clear. His executive order statements about justice for the families, about having this conversation, frankly, his executive order went a lot further. When you have Van Jones talking about this is a real executive order, Van Jones and President Trump on the same page, that's almost walking on water in America. So, there's a lot for us to actually celebrate about. Every lever of government wants change, and most of us want about 70% of the same change.
But if he perceives this to be not your bill, Mr. Stauber's bill, but perceives this to be a quote Democratic bill or something the House Democrats are putting together today in the markup.
Well, I can't speak to what the Democrats are doing. I would say that what we've done is a bipartisan piece of legislation, taking the priorities in the House bill, the words of the president in the executive order, and the fantastic minds behind me, and crafted it into a piece of legislation. So the legislation is already bipartisan. The question is, can we get bipartisan support?
Senator?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just clarify, are there active, ongoing negotiations with Democrats right now on changes to this bill that would get them on board before the motion to proceed vote?
Not with me. There are active conversations going on about Democrats. Let me say it this way. If we don't have the votes on a motion to proceed, that means that politics is more important than restoring confidence in communities of color in the institutions of authority.
On that point, we've seen bipartisan groups of lawmakers get together on big issues, whether it be immigration or gun violence or deficit reduction, only to have it fall apart. Why is this issue different?
Well, I think we've gone through a lot this year as a country. We started with impeachment. We found ourselves in a global pandemic, and in the global pandemic, I remember sitting and talking to Ben Sass about some of the challenges that we were facing, and working on and Lindsay on the unemployment issues. And I thought to myself, there's just no way that we're going to all come together and do something meaningful. Well, 96 votes later to 0, this Congress, the Senate, acted not in a bipartisan fashion, but just as good old-fashioned Americans making something happen for their neighbors, for their friends, and for people they've never met. I believe that if we take that same consciousness into this process, and we don't make it about bipartisan or partisan politics, we make it about families who've lost loved ones, about restoring trust, about respecting officers. If we can put that on the table and not your shirt versus skins game, we'll get to the finish line. I think this is the last question.
Senator, all throughout yesterday's hearing and throughout the debate after George Floyd's death, we've heard a number of viewpoints. It seems like Democrats and a number of activists are talking about systemic racism in policing. I don't hear any of you saying that. How does that, I could be wrong, I just didn't hear that yesterday, other than, Chairman Graham got talked a bit about that potential. But I wonder, how does that difference really affect the outcome of this bill? How does it affect your chances to get to a solution if you don't agree on the problem?
Well, I would say that if you look at the legislation and you look at the House legislation, you would have to come to the conclusion from a training perspective, the importance of de-escalation, the duty to intervene. Chokeholds is a place where you have common ground. I think if you look at the importance of data collection, you would say without any question, the Senate wants more information on serious bodily injury and on the use of force that leads to death. The House bill says they want information on all uses of force. Here's what we're saying. On the issue of data collection, we're on the same page. On training and on grants and on using the resources of the federal government to compel and to encourage behavior in local departments, we're on the same page. On misconduct of officers, we want a department by department database locally. They want a state database. The president in his executive order speaks about a national database. We're on the same page. So the fact that some people enjoy talking about systemic racism, the fact that some people want to define everything from a racist perspective, and we don't spend time on the definition of a word, but we spend time on the definition of the problem and the definition of the solution. When there's an overlap of 70-75% when you start, you're in the right place. So I don't know how to tell people that The nation is not racist. I'll try again. We're not a racist country. We deal with racism because there's racism in the country. Both are mutually true. They are both true, not mutually exclusive. So I don't worry about the definitions that people want to use. It's good for headlines, but it's really bad for policy. We're going to focus on getting something done. Thank you.
Can I just